Hi, this is Tamsen Granger.
This is Dan Abuhoff.
With Tamsen and Dan Read the Paper. It is Sunday, May 12th.
Pouring rain.
2019.
Right.
Mother's Day.
Oh, yeah. Mother's Day.
Pouring rain. So all a person can do is really put her feet up and snuggle by the fire. There is no gardening to be done today.
Yeah, right.
Happy
Mother's
goodness.
Day. Happy Mother's Day.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of a bleak day.
Yeah, I shouldn't even be doing this. It should be my day off.
I could do it myself if you
Okay.
want, but
Okay.
no one's going to listen. And, I don't bring in the fans like you do.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
All right, let's make it short.
All right.
And
So
sweet. What do you got?
we, of course, we went to the theater this week. We saw High Button Shoes and Encore's presentation, the concert version, in which they take musicals from a long time ago and do a weekend set of performances. High Button Shoes.
Gee Willikers. I hope no one was listening last week when you exhorted them to go.
I didn't tell them to go. I said it
You
might
did.
be worth
You
going.
always say,
How could I
"Oh."
tell them to go? I hadn't seen it.
Encore's always does a good job, he says.
Yeah, I'm going to have
It's
to
worth seeing.
dial that back. Notwithstanding the review in the Times, which called it fizzy and affable, of which that was the headline. The body of the review said nothing like that, as the Times sometimes does. So High Button Shoes is a show that took place, I guess it was put on in the late 40s, ran for a long time. It was successful, ran for more than Brigadoon. It was I don't know why. It's about these con men, a con man and sort of a partner who sort of wreaks some kind of havoc, mild havoc, I'll call it, in the New Jersey area. That was novel. They were talking about Rutgers and New Brunswick and even Princeton to some degree.
The old Raritan.
Right, and they made it down to Atlantic City. So Jersey, a lot of props to New Jersey. Here's the short story on this. It was written by Sammy Kahn and the music by Jules Stein. Jules Stein is a much admired Broadway composer. I mean, Sammy Kahn did a lot of great Frank Sinatra songs, wrote the words. As for Broadway, Jules Stein wrote, as we well know, he wrote Gypsy, one of the great classics beyond any possible challenge, and wrote Funny Girl, and I know to your mind, wrote the greatest of the television musicals, which of course was Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol. So we celebrate Jules Stein in our household. We like Jules. But this was one of his early attempts, and not so successful. Is that fair?
We did not enjoy it.
Yeah, the music wasn't great.
I
How's
can
that?
speak for myself, and you didn't seem that happy about it either. But it seemed to be a vehicle for Phil Silvers.
Yeah, that's
Phil Silvers is the guy who made it work.
Exactly right.
And they had the guy they had starring in this presentation, Michael Urie. Funny guy, but did not have that great vaudevillian, Brooklyn-born je ne sais quoi of Phil Silvers.
Yeah.
Just a wonderful, sleazy sort of con man. Always, always charming everybody, but always on the con, always on the make.
Exactly. The driving, relentless energy of Phil Silvers.
Somehow Urie just wasn't able to make that happen.
But well, let's just, can we get 30 seconds of Phil Silvers? Because not everyone knows Phil Silvers like we do. And I was happy to know that you were highly aware of Phil Silvers. I didn't want to assume it, but you are. You're younger than I am, let's face it.
I loved Sergeant Bilko.
Okay, Sergeant Bilko.
I loved it. And of course, I only saw it in reruns. I just looked up on the computer. It started in,
it was late 50s.
When I was a little peanut.
A peanut, yes.
In the mid-50s, actually. And but the reruns were always on.
Right.
And I just loved him.
Right.
I found him hilarious.
Yes. So Phil Silvers started as sort of a vaudeville-type performer. That's actually, I think, the article that we looked at said that he started basically singing at movie theaters when the projectionists stopped working because they had technical problems. That was his original job in 1920 or so. And he worked his way up the circuit, the vaudeville circuit, and then he got some jobs on Broadway as a comic. And he did this show, High Button Shoes, but it's not really one of his major deals. His first major deal was a few years after that, in which he played in Top Banana. It was basically the story of the Milton Berle television show in a comic way. And he was playing the Milton Berle character.
I feel like I've heard you talk about Top Banana.
I saw Top Banana.
Okay.
I saw a revival of it, the Westbury Music Fair, but who was in it but Phil Silvers?
Oh, my God.
And, if you want to be a Top Banana, you got to start at the bottom of the bunch.
You
yes.
really know
Oh, I saw Phil.
Silvers.
Oh, I know Phil Silvers. And then Phil Silvers, and this to me is a very interesting story. Phil Silvers, he was in Do Re Mi, which we've seen, which is also better than High Button Shoes. But then when Steve Sondheim wrote Funny Thing, he wanted to cast the main part as Phil Silvers. He wrote it for Phil Silvers. Mm-hmm. And Phil Silvers turned him down. So he had to get Zero Mostel. And of course, Zero Mostel made a tremendous success.
Why did he turn him down?
I don't know. But he did the show on Broadway, and then Mostel did the movie. But Silvers felt so bad about turning it down, he appeared in the movie as a secondary character.
I was going to say,
as Lycus or something like
him.
that.
Yeah. I think he actually plays Mostel's boss or owner or whatever.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, I don't remember exactly, but it's a secondary role. But that's how much he wanted to be a part of it. He felt so bad about turning it down.
Didn't he sing "Everybody Ought to Have a Maid"?
No, that's somebody else. But quite apart from that. It's a guy named Jesse Abrams. But quite apart from that, here's the funniest part. Later, they revived Funny Thing on Broadway. Phil Silvers takes the part then and gets the Tony for Best Actor in a Musical then for doing Funny Thing. All right? And of course, you saw him in the movies in Mad, 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 Mad World.
Yes, I was about 10 at the time.
I don't want to give away your age. Anyway, so Phil Silvers was always playing Phil Silvers.
I know. I definitely knew him growing up.
Right.
He was a household name.
So driving, relentless.
Right. Enough about him.
Full of energy.
Without him, this musical did not fly.
Michael Urie is not Phil Silvers.
Right.
And that was their only chance. They couldn't get Phil. Although I will tell you, I know about 15 real estate lawyers who could have played the part. So they could have found somebody else.
Really?
Yes.
That's hilarious. You know, the other thing is, I think it just, not a great musical.
Yeah. No, not a great musical, not a great production.
I think it's leaning heavily on nostalgia for those high button years. The
you,
leg of mutton sleeves.
You said something that they said in the Times Review, which is exactly right, which I thought was extremely remote, nuanced point, but you and the Times are seeing it the same way, that it's nostalgia upon nostalgia. It's an old musical that's based on the idea of an older musical.
Yeah.
It's kind of nutty.
Yeah. And, it's just, but, again, it was right around the time of things like Meet Me in St. Louis.
Right.
Where people were looking back at that era.
Right.
But I think the more you're removed from certain eras, they're not as nostalgic to you. And if that doesn't press that button, you've got to have other buttons to push, comedic or fabulous music or something. And I don't think High Button had it. So
no, that didn't. All right. So then we went last night to a minor league baseball game, which we've done once or twice before.
Great.
And we enjoyed that immensely.
Well,
as
that's
we
what
do.
people do to celebrate Mother's Day weekend.
Is that right?
Isn't it?
Is it?
Isn't it? I mean, it could be. You came up with the idea.
Yeah.
And we were coming from Pennsylvania to the Patriots Park, home of the Somerset Patriots.
Right.
And Nico and Granger met us there. They were on their way back from Brooklyn, and it was kind of a halfway point.
Right.
And we met at the park. We paid $2
to park
in the lot.
I shelled out for the paid parking.
Yes, but it's actually a ballpark that's attached to a mall.
Right.
So many people just park in the mall and walk across the street.
You go to Target, you park in front of Target, and you cross the street, you're in the ballpark.
Right, and you can pick up a few items on your
the
way,
Target.
besides the souvenirs.
Look, this couldn't be easier to get to, right? It's right off the highway.
Right.
And for people who live in Somerset or in that area particularly, it's very easy to get to. The parking is right there. It's not hard to get out. It costs nothing to park. It costs nothing to go to the game. We were sitting right behind the dugout. It's $15 a seat.
Yeah, $15 for a third row.
I mean, I thought they were going to ask you to pinch hit. I mean, we were right there. And of course, they had all the ballpark food that you can well imagine, which you work through your system.
And they had some of the, they had funnel cakes.
Yeah.
They had Guinness on tap.
They did.
They had Prosecco in a can. So everything you could need for an outing. And we noticed a few things about this. And we had a great time, and there were fireworks. And
fireworks again, and they were good fireworks.
Very good fireworks. Right. Worth the $15 alone. But what we did notice, a lot of families, a lot of dads with all the kids. And that we all thought might have been a Mother's Day thing.
Right.
That mom was getting a night off duty while dad took care of the kids at the ballpark.
And a lot of very young kids, too.
Very young kids.
Just running around the ballpark.
And a lot of the entertainment seemed aimed at this younger crowd. There were constant little races between mascots and,
7-year-olds.
Little contests for kids from the audience and, throwing T-shirts into the audience, etc. So it was fun, though. It was fun. I think we're going to go again. Well, it's funny. So by total coincidence, I had pulled an article during the week about another team in that league. It's an independent league. And the other team is the Long Island Ducks. And I should say the Somerset Patriots are a pretty successful team, as are the Long Island Ducks. And these are the kind of teams, these are not AAA teams. They're not high minor league teams that are affiliated with major league clubs. But they are sort of an odd collection of players, including former players who are kind of really on the way down, giving it a last shot, but have recognizable names. And the managers are often like that. So the team that played, what were they, the Barnstormers yesterday from Lancaster? Right.
Yeah. So they were managed by Sparky Lyle. Some people remember.
They were? Oh, yeah. I thought you said that the Patriots were.
I'm confused.
Patriots were because we were in the
you're right.
gift shop looking at the cards, the player cards.
That's right.
Sparky Lyle.
Exactly right. And my mistake. The Long Island Ducks are managed, according to this article, by Wally Backman. Now, Wally Backman was a guy who played second base for the Mets, a real hard-driving, hard-drinking guy on their championship team in 1986. And he's controversial because he always been a fiery, kind of a throwback type player, and then a manager. Was managed in the minor league system for the Mets. Managed players like Jacob deGrom, Noah Syndergaard, Steven Matz, Michael Conforto, priming himself for the top job in the major leagues, and he never got it. Why? Because he was a rough guy, because he was off, because he had a conviction for drunk driving, because there's an episode about domestic abuse. He even had a job for about 15 minutes to manage the Arizona Diamondbacks, and they found out about this. He declared personal bankruptcy. He has all kinds of personal problems. That's what's held him back. And he also can't get along with people, which kind of goes with that.
Okay.
So he's pretty much out of the bigs, except he hasn't given up on it.
Yeah.
So he's managing the Long Island Ducks. And he's the most old-time, fire-breathing guy in the world. And yet these teams are the ones that they use to experiment on new systems for the major leagues. So I don't know if you would notice, for example, there was no visiting of the manager to the mound in this game. Mm-hmm. They don't allow that.
Oh, really?
Okay?
Is that a new thing?
Yeah, it's a new thing. They're experimenting in these leagues. They're going to have automatic balls and strikes called by a machine later in the season.
Whoa!
All right. So you got the old throwback managers like in Sparky Lyle and Wally Backman. They're the ones who are going to be used to experiment with these new things. So it's
How
kind
does
of
that work?
It's totally weird. But Wally Backman hasn't given up. Sparky Lyle hasn't given up on managing the major leagues, and a lot of those players haven't given up. But it was a lot of fun. So.
Yes, indeedy. And while we're talking about sports,
yes,
let's just keep on this note.
Yeah.
Like one of your dream articles in the New York Times, the review section, I think, and written by John Urschel, Math Taught Like Football. And he is basically recommending that math teachers could learn a lesson from football coaches.
Well, we should say who John Urschel is.
Well, you can say who John Urschel is.
Well, John Urschel, you're reading the article and you're saying, well, here's a guy who says he was interested in math, and but he played football in high school and growing up in college, and he's comparing his experiences. And you don't realize, unless you know the name or you get through the whole article, he's a professional football player. This is a guy who's the real deal, all right? So he spends 3 years with the Baltimore Ravens. Right? And he writes an article now saying, I'm now a professional football. I'm pursuing my PhD in math. And
at MIT.
At MIT. And as I look back on it, he doesn't quite say this, but I'm not sure I took the right path. But one of the reasons I took the path I took was because I wasn't coached as enthusiastically in math as I was in football. And why is that? Which you go, what? Well, maybe there's something to that. And I think there might be something to it.
Well, he says he was always interested in math puzzles and, right. Even as a child, interested in logic, right. Etc. But the classes in school never engaged him.
Right.
And so he does end up playing football, going to Penn State, and majoring in math, etc. I mean, you almost majored in math. Right?
No, but I know what he's talking about. I know what he's talking about. I mean, because higher math is different than lower math, all right? College math is different. And, but what he's talking about is, that's a whole very challenging thing. And you would benefit from a lot of encouragement and engagement and even personal engagement on what you're doing when you get to more serious mathematics. And he didn't get that early on. He had no clue as to where.
Well, once he gets to college, he says, "Until I got to college, I didn't really know what mathematics was."
Exactly.
And I think you've said the exact same thing to me at some point. But what happens to him is a professor kind of takes him under his wing and lays out different problems for him, which he, gets engaged in and solves and begins on this path. And it's because of this professor's personal interest and coaching that, his interest in math survives and blossoms. He notes here, a growing body of research shows that students are affected by more than just the quality of a lesson plan. They also respond to the passion of their teachers and engagement of their peers, and they seek a sense of purpose. They benefit from specific instructions, constant feedback, and a culture of learning that encourages resilience in the face of failure. Not unlike football practice.
Right. But also, look, I think he makes a very good point, number one. Number two is, that reminded me, when I think of your teaching and what you talk about your teaching experiences. I mean, I'm sure, just listening to you talk, and people who listen to this to hear you talk about art, I know that you bring a certain amount of enthusiasm for the subject to it. And that only is conveyed when you're teaching students, but they also get a sense of why this should matter to them.
Right. But also the point he makes about specific instructions.
Yeah.
That is something I learned going along. Don't give these vague ideas of what you might want in the paper or whatever. Tell people exactly what you want, and then give them feedback about how that measures up. And football automatically does that. You're running a particular route. You have this to do. You know what the goal is. The goal is to make that.
You know why? Because the coach is invested in the player because the coach wants to win.
Right. Okay. But everybody there knows what the goal is. Yeah. It's very clear. Yeah. Okay.
Well, they have to do that. That's part of it.
And so he makes a good point, and he sums that up by saying all good teachers, like good coaches, communicate that they care about your goals. Exactly. Because you have the same
Well, that's
goals,
what I mean. That's what I'm talking about the art, too. It's not a matter of saying, I'm interested in art. It's a matter of saying, here's why you might be interested in art.
And it's rarely a matter of having a brilliantly written,
lesson plan.
Lecture to make. It's making all that land. And how do you make it land? By developing
which is a people
that
thing.
Interaction.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. All right, so, I'm not usually excited about commencement addresses. Not that they're not...
I am.
I know you are.
I love those pithy bits of wisdom.
I do, but at a certain point, there are so many tropes you can have. They're kind of redundant. You hear the same thing every year, or you hear 15 little quotes.
At my age, I can hear it every year, and it seems perfectly new.
Okay, well, I'm still remembering them. But there's an article by Jason Gay, The Secret No One Will Tell You, and it's not really presented as a commencement address, but it might as well be. And, he covers several things. It's not worth covering all of it, but he makes one point, which I think is a really good point. And that is, and here's the quote, nobody really knows what they're doing. Nobody. And that, to me, is actually very important.
True.
And it's so true. And I think when you're a young person, and I'm not talking about 18, I'm talking about 28. I'm talking about 35. You don't quite get that. You're sitting in a room with people saying everybody knows what's going on and knows how to do
I'm
it.
Clueless.
But me. And I'm the one who didn't get the secret handshake. I'm the one who was sick on that day at school. Everyone's got it. No one's got it. Okay? That's
especially not the guys who are saying most loudly that they've got it.
Right.
Okay?
Well, it says even the people who seem like they know what they're doing, they don't know what they're doing. Everyone is making it up as they go along. Look, that is just true. And they don't believe you. And it couldn't be more true. He also says another thing, that people have to learn to embrace that chaos, get comfortable with not knowing. And he cites some survey where they're surveying people in their 90s about when they're happiest. And they were during the period in their lives when things were kind of out of control. They couldn't figure out what to do with the kids. They didn't have the money. They didn't know whether kind of chaos.
Right.
And they kind of worked it through. And it's a matter of you get comfortable with that. That's through the motions. Those people are not investing in the kind of thinking they have to be doing. The best that I have is that you don't know what you're doing, because that's what causes you to re-examine everything you have to do. That's the secret yourself. You have as good a chance of figuring it out as anybody else. So I thought that resonated. Thank you.
Well, you handed me an article called "Why You Should Binge Read."
Right.
By Ben Dolnick.
Because you're a great reader.
He's
That's
an
why
author.
You're the reader. You're the reader in the family.
But that's not at all true. But I have done some serious binge reading lately.
Yeah.
And he is basically, it's kind of a cute article that compares, binge reading to, binging on Netflix series, etc. So I guess that is what makes it fun. But his basic point is you're doing the wrong thing if you're just reading something for 5 or 10 minutes and then going to sleep and then picking it up in another few days and then giving it another 5 or 10 minutes. He said you got to really get into it and give it a chance and get yourself engaged.
Yeah.
Which doesn't seem quite like binge reading to me. I think he just wanted to use that phrase.
Right.
But I have done some binge reading. I mean, I will do that. I fell in love with the Deborah Harkness books, and I read right through them.
All right. That's great.
And it is fun, and it's engaging and rewarding, and you're devastated when it's over, just like you're devastated when, it's the finale of whatever series you're watching. So there is some correlation there. But I think hopefully we still have room in our lives for binging in all these different areas. Yeah. The small screen and the book and the audiobooks, whatever.
Well, look, you got to. It's a much simpler point to me too. You got to give it some time. Sometimes something doesn't capture your interest in the first 5 minutes. It's worth the investment. And that gives you the chance to get carried away. It's hard. I can tell you because I read bits on the train, and sometimes it's not registering with me. Yeah. But when I put aside a half hour, it's a different experience.
I do have certain books that I only read a bit at a time.
Yeah. And
it doesn't bother me.
Okay.
And they're good for that. There's the enormously long biography of the artist Thomas Gainsborough. Mm-hmm. I've been reading forever. Uh-huh. But, it's a biography. And so, I'm not going to find out who killed the butler. I'm not anxious to do that, but I don't mind the latest little revelations. So there's room for all these approaches, I think.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Listen, there seem to be a lot of books about Dr. Seuss. There's a new one called Becoming Dr. Seuss by Brian J. Jones, and there's a review of it by Megan Cox Gordon in the Wall Street Journal. So it's not worth going over all the details about Dr. Seuss, except for this thing that came to my attention for the first time, is that he started writing children's books. He really started writing children's books because he had a contract with Standard Oil to do some creative writing or writing generally. And
what?
He worked for
Standard Oil.
Yeah, he was basically doing illustrations for them. But the exceptions that he was allowed were limited, but one of the exceptions that applied was children's books. So that's how he got into children's books.
So he couldn't write for anybody else.
Right.
Because it would be in conflict.
Exactly.
With his job.
Right.
But children's books he could write.
Interesting. That's exactly why he did it. But in any event, it came wartime. This is just a strange twist. In 1942, film director Frank Capra recruited Geisel to work for him in a special army unit devoted to producing orientation and morale-raising materials for the wartime troops. And this apparently was a turning point for Geisel. Capra, of course, was a great director, did It's a Wonderful Life and other movies, comic movies generally.
Geisel is Dr. Seuss's
Geisel is Dr. Seuss, yes, sorry. And this, according to the book, and this is a quote, Capra taught me conciseness, Geisel said. I learned a lot about the juxtaposition of words and visual images. The tight storytelling discipline instilled by Capra, according to Jones, would be formative in shaping Geisel's future art. Well, that's interesting to me because, there are many things that go into making Geisel successful as he was, besides the funny drawings. And the idea that Frank Capra was a masterful director was such an influence on him. It was a turning point in his career is logical. It makes perfect sense. And it's amazing to me.
Well, that is fascinating. And it just, again, underlines that idea that you read something like the Dr. Seuss books, Cat in the Hat, etc., Green Eggs and Ham, and you don't imagine everything that went into it.
Yeah.
They're much more sophisticated.
Right. It wasn't born being able to write like that, and they're very complicated.
And it's really funny because our friend Lisa Walsh is actually working on a children's book at the moment.
Yeah.
And to listen to all the efforts she's going through and the editing and reworking and rewriting and rethinking is just...
Well, there is more detail of that here, including that when he wrote the books, he had a list of 236 words, limited vocabulary, children's vocabulary.
And he limited them.
And he would only use the words on the 236.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, there's a lot about Dr. Seuss. I mean, that's a whole complex story.
Yeah.
No matter how you look at it.
He's a complicated guy.
Complicated guy.
All right. But great. So here's an article that explains a lot. And it's called Is Conference Room Air Making You Dumber? It turns out.
It is.
It is. It is. Because it turns out that they say, that every time you walk out of a conference room, it feels a little cooler, and you realize it was stuffy in there. Here's what's going on. When you have a conference, even for a relatively short time, there's a buildup of carbon dioxide in the room, which actually has detrimental effects on cognitive functioning.
Come on. Don't they have ventilation? I could understand that if this was 1935 or something, but all these buildings have
Here's
tremendous
the explanation,
recirculation of air and blah, blah,
Buildings in the U.S. have grown better sealed in the last 50 years, helping reduce energy used in heating and cooling. That's also made it easier for gases and other substances released by humans to build up inside.
So that's why we're not subject to that, because we live in drafty old houses.
Exactly
that
right.
Are not
we're on the top of our game because we're not being stuck with carbon dioxide. But this explains everything. All the dumb decisions that have been made by every organization over the last 30 years, the explanation is that they were made in conference rooms which were filled with carbon dioxide. Now we know.
Okay.
All right. So another problem solved. Bizarre.
Wine in a can.
Yes. Again, talking about questionable decisions.
So this is an article in the New York Times, and it's about some people who have started a company, Sans Wine. I don't really get what that means. It seems to mean without wine, but anyway, they founded this company in order because they wanted to be able to have decent wine in a small serving that you could take on a picnic or on a hike, all right? So the discussion is, can you really do it? And it seems possible. Another group that was developing wines did it because they had a pizzeria. They wanted, again, to be able to serve wine by the glass, and yet they find themselves, dumping out wine, half a bottle of wine or whatever all the time because it goes bad. So they wanted to be able to offer, again, kind of single servings. And so the Sans Wine Company actually has really high quality, interesting, sort of good, drinkable wines. Not available here, near where we live, I don't think, but available, I guess, in California, etc. But then there are lesser companies that also sell these wines in a can, and a lot of them are quite undrinkable. So it's, up for grabs. If you have a 12-ounce can, like a beer can, of course. For beer, that's a single serving.
Yeah.
For wine, that's more than a single serving. And it certainly is more alcohol than a beer. Because think about it.
Sure.
Average wine has about 12% alcohol as opposed to, most, what would you say, most beers are more like 5 or 6?
Yeah.
I mean, there are
even
fancier
less.
craft
Even
beers
less.
with even more.
I call it
so
5,
when you drink
right.
a whole can of that, it's really more than what we would call a single serving of wine.
Right.
Nonetheless, it sounds like a pretty good thing. I've actually had Prosecco in a can.
Right.
At Classic Stage.
Right.
The little counter that serves coffee.
That was a very small can, wasn't it?
It wasn't. No.
It wasn't 12 ounces.
No, I think it was probably 8 ounces max.
Yeah. And of course,
Prosecco is quite low in alcohol.
But it's also
it was quite decent. It was quite drinkable.
It's also effervescent. It's bubbly.
Yeah.
Okay. These wines aren't bubbly, I assume, generally speaking.
They have both. They people are working on trying to be able to provide all of them. I think the other tricky thing is the expense. They can cost like $15 to $25. Okay. So $25 for a can of anything seems crazy.
Plus, you're thinking of it like a half bottle of wine. That's the idea. Yes, you say it to me. Sometimes we go out and you want to drink wine, but you're not going to drink a whole bottle. You might go for a half bottle, and that would be a solution. But it's $15. It seems a lot.
$15. I don't think that's much better. Look, if you buy wine by the glass in a restaurant,
it's about $12.
These days it's about $12 to $15.
Yeah.
Okay. So that would be.
That's less, but that's a restaurant charge. But yeah,
the restaurant would charge more anyway. Cans have come a long way. They're lighter. They're coated with some kind of polymer inside, so the flavor is not affected by the metal. It's
good they're thinking about this. I think they'll solve it.
It's good. It seems handy, but it's still like all the other improvements in wine, the screw top and everything else. People are still snobby about it.
Well, do they not make half bottles anymore? Not of good wine.
No, they do make half bottles.
Yeah.
But it's still, isn't a can more...
Should be cheaper.
A can is more portable.
Yeah. Yeah, a can has advantages. But...
And is it really a half bottle would be, about 15 ounces?
Well, if it's 32
ounces. 32, 15, 16 ounces.
Yeah.
So that's like...
That's a little more.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll look for that. In terms of obituaries, Jim Fowler died. Jim Fowler was on Wild Kingdom for years. He's a naturalist. And Wild Kingdom was one of those shows, which I think you watch more than I do.
No, I never watched that.
All right. Sorry I said it.
I'm the person who would see him turn up on the Merv Griffin show or the Johnny Carson show.
So the Mutual of Omaha Wild Kingdom.
I can't believe he was 89.
Why would you have thought he was so young?
Because I don't know. He just, he always looked ageless.
Well, he was a young-looking guy.
Yeah.
Like Bob Cummings, basically. I mean, they have pictures of him with various lizards and whatever in the obit. They had told a story about him being charged. In that line of business, there are moments of peril. They described one situation in which he was charged by an elephant, and he just ran and he just escaped in a car. As he put it, you can bluff a male elephant, but not a female. There's no explanation there. Maybe it's just like humans. Who knows? But as you say, he was many times on shows
Pearls
like
of
Merv
Wisdom.
Griffin.
Keep that in mind.
Yes,
wherever around elephants.
Look to see if it's a male or a female before you make your next move. So he's on the Johnny Carson show 50 times. And, people remember the Carson show, and maybe they still do this on these shows. They would have a naturalist. Jim Fowler would come on. He'd have an animal in tow, some strange exotic animal.
Yeah, they still do this.
And it would wreak havoc on the set, and there was cause for mirth. They quote one situation here in which Jim Fowler brought on the set a large crane named Stanley, who they had been monitoring and imprinted in some way. And
like a large bird.
A large bird, yes.
Okay.
And Fowler explained that because Stanley was imprinted, they can follow him, but for that reason he'll probably never have any courtship behavior because females won't be interested. And Carson responded, "I know exactly how Stanley feels." So there you go. It's a good setup for Carson. And Tamsen would have been hysterical, but I told her that joke earlier, and she did laugh. But it was funnier than you would expect it to be. So he passed away.
Kids and animals are always funny, right?
Yeah. Oh, it's not always, but he was good.
Yeah, they're pretty dependable.
All right.
Okay.
So Mother's Day.
Well, of course, in honor of Mother's Day, what is it? The Duchess of Sussex gave birth.
Right.
Meghan Markle.
Exactly.
Had her baby, wonderfully dressed for the photograph. Really cute little bambino in a nice little white cap and swaddle. And so there's lots of excitement. Did you know the name? The name is Archie.
Oh.
What a great name.
Is it?
I
don't know.
And he's not going to have a title. Okay.
Oh, no?
No. So that makes him more of a normal person. So there's all this excitement. So, of course, there are all these other articles about royal births. And there's quite a wonderful one in the New York Times describing, a couple of different stories about royal births. A lot of them sad and weird. In 1688, Mary, the second wife of James II, who was Roman Catholic, announced the birth of a baby boy. For some reason, no one thought she would give birth. Mm-hmm. And the Protestants were not happy that there was this new Catholic baby in line for the throne. And so they were spreading the rumor that it couldn't possibly be hers, that somehow a baby was, smuggled in from somebody else. So from then on, there's this whole official entourage of witnesses to the birth that doesn't stop until Elizabeth II is about to give birth. And there's a whole...
Did they say enough of that?
Enough of that.
Wow.
Then there's a sad story of Princess Charlotte, the only child of George IV, Prince of Wales, who was 21 and a newlywed when she became pregnant. And during the course of her delivery, it's ascertained that the baby is kind of stuck in, the pelvic, whatever. And because her doctor is old school, he refuses to use forceps, wants nature to take its course. After 50 hours of labor, my God. The child is stillborn. Yeah. And she dies. Yeah. And later the doctor actually commits suicide.
Well, you saw that kind of stuff in Downton Abbey, where you had the old school doctor.
These are all stories from life. And of course, one of the great birthing queens of all time, Queen Victoria.
How many children did she have?
She had like a zillion. I don't know. But it was on her... she was pregnant or nursing for 16 years of her adult life. And she considered pregnancy the shadow side, Schattenseite of marriage, and told her daughter that childbirth was a complete violence to all one's feelings of propriety, which, God knows, receive a shock enough in marriage alone. Anyway,
that's a great line.
It was during this period that they developed chloroform, which
I remember that. Yeah,
was known to have anesthetic qualities and could greatly improve your labor experience.
I understand it.
Her doctors didn't want her to use it because it would slow labor, which is what they always tell you. Oh yeah, you can have some pain relief, but then it's going to take longer, whatever. But also, there was a prominent American obstetrician, Charles Miggs, at the time, who warned against trying to stop the natural and physiological forces that the divinity has ordained for us to enjoy or to suffer. Us, meaning women. Us, Mr. Miggs, Dr. Miggs. And but finally, in 1853, before the birth of her 8th child, she is allowed to inhale chloroform for 53 minutes from a handkerchief. She loved it. Describing blessed chloroform, soothing, quieting, and delightful beyond measure.
Yes, she got the chloroform. You know why? She's the Queen of England. That does it. She gets the chloroform. That's all it takes.
All right, so chloroform, here we come.
Yes. All right, so that wraps it up for Tamsen. Dan, read the paper.
This is Tamsen. What am I supposed to say? This is Tamsen Granger?
That's close enough.
And Dan Abuhoff, and we'll be back again next week.
See ya.